Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the third in a series of 4 special events this week in anticipation of the election for the new Chancellor of Cambridge University. All this week you'll be able to keep up to date with the latest developments in the Chancellor's election online using the hashtag #CamChancellor or on the Union's website. And from tomorrow morning we'll be releasing unedited footage of all the talks to our 50,000 live members online. Tonight we're delighted to welcome Abdul Arain. Abdul was born in Nairobi and then moved to the UK, where he's had a successful business career. He is now owner of the Al-Amin grocery store on Mill Road, and he was the first candidate to officially oppose Lord Sainsbury, creating the first contested election for the Chancellorship in 164 years. Abdul, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Somebody asked me, would you be intimidated when you go into this room which is full of history? I think Cambridge is full of history. As soon as you start walking through it, you begin to accustom yourself to it. Anyway, sorry, I need to just use my glasses. The first question, I think, on most of your minds would be, why am I not running for Chancellor? On the surface of it, I'm hardly the likely candidate. And I guess it came as unexpected to me as it did to most of you. I'm not a known, nor for that matter are 2 of the candidates or the outgoing Chancellor. I'd never really thought about standing for the post until I was approached by some of the Cambridge academics. I asked for some time to think over it, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt that it would be an opportunity to stand up for what I think is great about Cambridge and for my ethical values, to be a symbol of an institution that influences absolutely all walks of life and has an authority to speak out on all important issues that affects us all. This was before, as Callum said, any other candidate had announced that they were running against Lord Sainsbury. I agreed to stand, and I received over 100 nominations from academics, postgrads, and alumni. This is why I'm here before you today. I suppose the next question would be, why would they want to nominate me? You know, some may say that I'm here as a protest to Sainsbury's opening on Mill Road. That may be part of it, but it's not just a question of a threat to my business. What it ultimately is a question of different values. There are values that guide businesses like Tesco, Sainsbury's, among others, and we can see the consequences of these values on our society, on our local communities, on the university, and then there are the values that I represent. A chain store takes in money, then the money is sent to their corporate headquarters, which then goes on to shareholders. Their profits are not reinvested in the community. So effectively, the store is there to drain money out of a community and not to contribute towards it. And this has consequences. Look at the high streets up and down the country. If you look at Dunstable, you look at Haverhill, you look at other towns, but closer to home, let's look at Saffron Walden, Bury St Edmunds, Cherry Hinton, Chesterton. Once a supermarket opens, most of the independent businesses begin to close down. Then there remains a large supermarket, betting shops, charity shops, a few eateries, takeouts, and many, many boarded shops. The result of this is that people no longer feel ownership of where they live. They no longer feel pride in it and the antisocial behavior that comes up as a result. This past summer, we saw people up and down the country in many cities, all over, violently destroying their own communities without wanting to ever oversimplify the matter. I think that an important part of what caused that violence is living in circumstances that they didn't feel their community belongs to them, and that it adds anything to their own existence. Effectively, they feel defranchised to the area that they live in. My values are different. I believe in running a business as an extension to the community we live in. I believe that individuals should be an active part of their community, give back to it. And the businesses and institutions should reinvest into the community. This is something which I've preached for years, And this is why I have led or been involved with a number of institutions in my community since the 1990s. This is why I agreed to deliver a series of lectures on behalf of the World Bank on accountability and the bottom-up approach to high-level delegates from various governments around the world. Why I chaired the Committee on Mill Road Improvement since 1997. I was a founding member and chairman of a very successful Mill Road Winter Fair, governor of local schools. Why I sponsored an energy wizard competition which looked at promoting promoting the issues on climate change and bringing an awareness, particularly to the young who are going to be the buds of tomorrow. This all happened in 2005, much before Sainsbury's applied to open a store on Mill Road, and long before anyone had ever started talking about the big society. The way I do business works on this model of involvement. There are three dimensions to who is involved. First, there is the ownership, which includes the management and people who work. Then there is the suppliers, who make up this, who we make sure are the sort of people who share our values, and they conduct their business in a manner which treats their people well and produce products which are ethically sourced. Finally, they are customers. They are the most important because without them there is no business. Most of our customers keep coming back because they feel this is a place where other people share their values, and they feel a sense of ownership. Out of many other customers, a couple spring to mind. These couple came from Saffron Walden. The next day they turned up in tow with a group of people, and as they went around the shop, they started talking about, we keep this here, and we keep that there, and we keep others elsewhere. I feel that this we is very, very important. In a way, this is what my campaign is about. As I said earlier, it was Cambridge academics who asked me to stand. And they did this because they know the shop, they know the values it stands for, they know me, and they know what I stand for. And they felt that these are the values that should guide the university. So how would they guide the university? Firstly, we're talking about being involved in the community. The university cannot be aloof from this. Cambridge University has struggled to be close to both the city and its residents. Again, this is a statement of intent by the university that it aspires to be closer to and to work and live more closely with its local neighbours. I feel my appointment would symbolize this. In other words, town and gown need to be closer together. They have often been seen as being at odds with each other, but it does not have to be that way. In fact, in a healthy community, it should not be. Similarly, the university would not be what it is today, the top university in the world, if Cambridge as a town was not a place where the best students and academics were happy to call home. As it is now, there are academics who could have much higher paid jobs in other universities in the States, in Japan. I know of some of my friends who've been approached from Singapore, in Europe, but they choose to stay in Cambridge. And there are some who commute to jobs in other universities while they still continue to live in Cambridge. The university academic life benefits from the fact that these people want to be part of the community here, when they could be financially better off if they moved away. For the sake of the university, we need to make sure that Cambridge continues to be a vibrant community that attracts and holds the best minds in the world. This is where the university being involved in the community comes in. If you look around the city centre, you will see the consequences of a certain way of doing business. The wrong way, in my opinion. There are 2 supermarkets, lots of closed shops, chains, and a very small number of dwindling independent businesses. The land in the city centre is mostly owned by various colleges. Naturally, as I was talking earlier on, the bursars are keen to get as much as they can out of their property. And as they find that chains can pay more for their properties than independent businesses, They charge rents that only chains can afford. Look at the results. If we were to look down the road, we'll find that Galloway Porter's just closed down. It's a bookshop on Sydney Street. There's a Trinity Street, St. John Street post office. If we look, the post office is downsized. Unless the university was to look at this, we will find that we will end up with the same type of streets up and down the country. What is more important in a university community? Is it books and a post office nearby, or the same kind of shops in every high street and number of shops standing empty? Unless the university and colleges act to protect local businesses, Cambridge will become more of a clone town. You may be aware that we recently received the dubious accolade of most cloned town in Britain due to the lack of independent businesses in the city centre. I think they said there was one left. It's the contrast with this that makes Mill Road so famous. The Islington of Cambridge, according to the Telegraph. That's the Daily Telegraph. In Mill Road, we have Europeans, Greeks, Turks, Indians, South Americans, Chinese, British, and others. And they all have their stalls there, their cafes, their restaurants. Not only that, but the centres of their community, their churches, their places of worship, their mosques, their temples. So the diversity you get is not just economic. But because their communities are based there, they have a vested interest in Mill Road, and they reinvest their profits in it by shopping in the area. If you were to talk about job creation, not only are there more jobs created by independent businesses, but also of a better quality. Most chain stores and supermarkets can be run with relatively small number of staff, especially if you were to look at now automated checkouts. I believe that this Sainsbury on St Andrews has most of its stores now as automated checkouts. The employees never see the people they're working for because, as I said, the money goes to the corporate headquarters and then to shareholders. They get a salary and that's it. Now, if we look at Mill Road, you not only get more jobs out of the several independent stores, but you have a situation where the employees know the people they're working for. Often, they will be there long term. They feel a connection to the place and the people there. If I was to look at some of my staff, they'll be there for as long as my shop has been open. And I think that's the kind of business model you need to have for a vibrant community and a society where people can be fulfilled. Don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-business. I believe there needs to be a balance. In fact, I believe if we look at the German economies, you have a balance between the interests of globalization and the interests of local communities. I believe nationally at the moment, and certainly globally, the trend today is to move away from that and move towards an economy dominated by multinational corporations, where individuals own less and less of their own communities. In a situation where the university is having its government funding cut by a large amount, the temptation is to go away with this in hope of bigger donations. We need to bear in mind that the role of a university is to foster critical thinking, ability to prosper above financial concerns. I was speaking yesterday to a journalist who represents a major publication, worldwide publication yesterday, and what she said to me was that as a Cambridge graduate, 10 years since she graduated, she's still paying for her loans. And if she'd known then what she knows now, she may not have considered it. We need to bear that in order for people to prosper, it needs to be a complementary cushioning effect of all factors which come into being. I am standing for people in the university and the community who want to see an alternative. I want to be able to bring diversity and vibrancy of Mill Road into the university. So how would I do that? Firstly, we have to be realistic about what the office of Chancellor is. It is not about having executive power, nor is it about dealing with figures and technicalities. It is not about administration. Over the centuries, the university has evolved a system where the Chancellor is a figurehead, and the government of the university is vested in the Vice-Chancellor. I'm not going to suggest that I can change that, but for offices like that of Chancellor, one has a choice between being merely a figurehead, that is just presiding over things, or trying to symbolize, something that the university should stand for. And this is the kind of Chancellor I would try to be. How would that benefit the university? One of the big issues facing universities today, particularly Cambridge, is how accessible it is to bright students from less privileged backgrounds. And as the new tuition fees set in an issue, this issue is not going to go away, or neither is it going to be easy to deal with. The university engages in a lot of outreach activities to encourage bright students from state schools who don't think Cambridge is within their reach. But you will still find a disproportionate amount of students who come from private schools. The fact is that there is a lot of students in state schools who are put off by applying either because they don't think they have the right sort of education, or that they're not bright enough, or because they think that they are the right sort of person. In other words, Cambridge University has an image in their mind that makes it seem closed off to them. The image of Cambridge University is a place really of people of a specific background, of a privileged education and well-connected. We need to break down that image and make sure that the image the university has for all the students in the country is that of a place where the brightest minds, whatever their background. Frankly, I don't think Lord Sainsbury is someone who can change that image. I don't mean this as a personal attack, but I think he would be the last person to deny that he comes from the same background of privilege. There's nothing wrong with that in itself. But if people are looking to a university and they see at the top someone from the same sort of background that is now producing our prime ministers or our political leaders, many of them will feel that Cambridge is somewhere that is closed off to them and only open to people from a certain background. And a university is the last place we want anyone to feel that, because universities are the most powerful means our society has for raising up people, giving them better opportunities in life, and creating a more equal society. Now, on the other hand, if someone thinking of applying to Cambridge looked at the university and at the top they saw someone unexpected, someone you would have thought was an outsider, someone from a different kind of background, they might just think, why can't I do that too? What kind of Chancellor would I be? I cannot make the university put down tuition fees or make the government give more money to higher education. But I can be a symbol for the university that is diverse, open, and grounded in its local community. And I firmly believe that being diverse, open, and grounded in the local community is the only way the university can remain what it is, the best in the world. And the only way it can go even further from strength to strength. So to conclude, why should you vote for me? First, if you believe that individuals, and by extension businesses, and universities should be constructively engaged with their community, Cambridge needs more of this attitude. And ultimately, it was this belief that prompted the people who nominated me to do so in the first place, because they know that that is what I always stood for. I will urge the university to protect Cambridge community and to protect it from becoming more of a clone town with multinational chains and sky-high rents. Secondly, if you want greater diversity in the student body, as a symbol, I believe I can inspire most students who never would have thought of applying to Cambridge to come here. And finally, if you want a Chancellor who can be a symbol of what this university can and should stand for, rather than merely a figurehead. Dan, vote for me. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're now going to, no, if you like to, if you want to just, we're now going to open it up to questions from the floor. We have a couple of people with microphones who will sort of try and run them to you. I think firstly we're just going to try and sort out the pocket mic. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Yes, gentleman back there, if you can just wait for a microphone.
I'm totally behind you in your encouragement of independent shops, but I think both the report that called Cambridge a cloned town and some of the things you've said are not quite right, because if you look at Cambridge, at King's Parade, Trinity Street, Green Street, King Street, and a lot of Mill Road, it's full of independent shops. And yeah, there are quite a few multinationals, and I'm not over the moon about them, but I think it'd be wrong to say that Cambridge doesn't have an awful lot of very good independent shops.
Okay. I didn't say that Cambridge does not have a range of independent shops, particularly alluding to Mill Road. What I said was that the Economist has named Cambridge Clone Town, but what I also said is that the thing that brings the brightest minds to Cambridge and keeps them here is the fact that they experience that quality of life and the difference. If we were to allow more multinationals to move in without controlling that, we would find that independent businesses will disappear. Now let's go to Trinity Street. There were many independent shops, and you are seeing them slowly disappear. If we go to Cherry Hinton High Street, in fact, it was a wonderful bazaar. But if we look at what's happened over the last 7 or so years, all of them have disappeared. I think there is one polish shop now, a chemist, Tesco's, some charity shops, and a lot of antisocial behavior. I hope that answers your question.
Yes.
Thank you. You've spoken a great deal about the ethics of business and given what could be interpreted as a call to arms against homogenous town centres. But do you have a real passion for academia in higher education? And if you do have that attribute, how would we see it manifested in your role as Chancellor of this university?
That's a good question. In actual fact, I have been governors of a school. I work with many of the secondary schools to see how children, or young people in this case, take on further education. As far as academia is concerned, I believe that Cambridge has a very good foundation of research, and certainly it wants to attract a number of students who come from less privileged backgrounds. Now, I believe that that's where I would come in most. I also represent a very diverse background. I come from a different way. If you look at me today, I had a question which was quite funny in a way. And they said, well, being someone of a different faith to what a lot of the ceremonies may be prayed in, that was how the question was asked to me. How do you feel about it? I said, well, actually, it is the diversity that makes it more interesting. You'll find me quite happily speaking at the Baptist Church in Cambridge, as I will be in the mosque. But most importantly, I think it is education that takes us out from poverty. And it is education which makes us excel. And Cambridge itself has excelled because it has offered the opportunity to Newton, who just happened to have an apple drop. But it was the fact that he was here, under that tree, having that opportunity, which allowed us to benefit from his great mind.
There is one question that the Students' Union have asked that all the candidates are asked, and that's that in the past the role of Chancellor has been given over to a variety of different causes, but one that's often been overlooked is widening participation. What specifically would you try to do to widen access both to Cambridge but also to higher education more generally?
As I've alluded to earlier, I think one of the things I feel very passionately about is access by state school students. I believe that there is a great well of brilliant minds who feel that Cambridge is just not attainable because it's for others who may be more privileged. But I believe that's not the case. I believe Cambridge is very inclusive, and I believe that their experience here would enrich our society. Particularly if we look at even people like Margaret Thatcher, you know, she comes from a shopkeeper background, but she went on to become Prime Minister. And there are others within our political framework. And I believe that would be one thing which I would feel very, very strongly about, looking at how we could attract diversity.
Yes, the lady at the back.
Cambridge generates both research income and philanthropic donations from major corporations, amongst other things. How does that sit with your values?
I believe as an individual or as an institution, one needs to have the ability to pay back into the society that we live in. I also believe that you need to be guided by the ethical values that you feel strongly about. So I believe there needs to be a marrying of the two. So answering your question, I would say that it is very important for all members of our community, regardless of where they are, where they come from, to pay back into their community, because that's what has enriched them. And by giving back, they then enrich others who benefit from that, and civilization carries on. I understand your question is slightly more of an ethical nature, but I think there needs to be a marrying between values and your ability to then provide the funding that you're looking for.
Yes, we'll take.
You've spoken very passionately about the community in general and paying back into it, but at the same time, as a university, we need to look into raising funds. How would you personally go about trying to raise funds for the university?
If we look around the world today, we would find that the influences come away from a lot of the traditional sources, particularly if we look at Asia, look at South America. Now they are looking for people and maybe being attracted by those who are diverse. And they bring a different type of culture, and they feel that this is something that they also can reach towards. Now if we look at my background, I spent a lot of time in Asia. I was born in Africa. I spent much of my life in the Middle East. Whilst upholding the values that I feel strongly about, I believe those are the places, including institutions that share the same values that I do in the UK, who I would look at donating towards a much better education and financial structure. I don't think at this moment in time that Cambridge will not be able to meet the financial pressures that it has. In fact, even if we look at the university statement, it talks about being able to meet the gap between tuition fees by 2015. So coming back to what I'm saying, Cambridge University is a wonderful institution which has global appeal, and I believe that my diversity will attract others and maybe more refined sources to looking at contributing towards it.
I don't disagree with what you're saying on diversity and so on, and I very much agree with that, in fact. I want to know what you as a Chancellor will do in terms of being vocal, and specifically I'd like to know how vocal, and if you are going to be vocal, in speaking out against the tuition fee rise we saw late last year and tuition fees in general, so that you can promote better, or certainly from my opinion, your agenda of diversity and access.
I think that's a very good question, and it's quite challenging. We live at the moment in very challenging times, and whilst I understand the need of the university to balance its books, I also think that there needs to be a mechanism in place, particularly through bursaries and others, which would address the disparity between access by those who are less privileged. But at the same token, I believe that as people become more educated, a university education gives them the ability to earn more, and as a consequence, they then pay more taxes. So I believe that the government also needs to address those in the long term. Whilst I can't say exactly what I would do, but I certainly believe that there needs to be a balance. And that balance I would certainly voice.
Yes.
You've described a very busy lifestyle in which you're involved with a lot of organisations. How much of your time would you be able to dedicate to the Chancellorship?
I feel very passionately about Cambridge University, and the position of Chancellor. So I would devote the time that it requires. I may have other interests which may need to be prioritized, but certainly it is one of the things which I feel has a great priority in my life.
Yes.
Why am I standing? I understand that one of the powers of the Chancellor is to chair the Cambridge University Council, I believe it is. I understand that as Chancellor you would not necessarily have the moving power to make internal changes, but as chair of that committee you would be able to influence them, to suggest some changes. How would you use that position to benefit the university, the student body, and the university staff?
As I mentioned earlier, I think it is incumbent upon every individual or institution to make sure that they articulate then arrive at a conclusion which gives ownership to the decision by those who participate in it, I think is an important position for one to find oneself in.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, I think we'll wrap it there.
Thank you very much. Thank you.